I married into the Wei family as a successor wife. In 3 years of marriage, I served my mother, in-law, and treated the young son with kindness, never slacking for a single day. Yet, I was implicated and put to death because of a concubine's difficult labor. The son I carefully raised for 3 years claimed I lacked virtue and character and was unworthy of being a mother. Upon my rebirth back to the moment, my husband wanted to take his late wife's sister into the household. I completely changed my former firm opposition and busied myself arranging an 8-bearer sedan chair to welcome her in. Songshu had a difficult labor, narrowly escaping death. She suffered in agony for 3 whole days, risking her life to give birth to a son for the Wei family. I heard the servants in the manor say that Songshu had a brief moment of clarity and left a blood-stained strip of cloth saying, "That poisonous woman, Fei Yu, deserves a horrible death." Every word was steeped in sorrow, the hatred cut to the bone. After hearing this, in order to bring a smile to Songshu's face, Wei Changyi barged into my bedroom. Without giving me the slightest chance to explain, he thrust a spear straight into my left chest. His movements were fierce, his killing intent plain to see, with anger lingering in his eyes. He interrogated me. "You poisonous woman, why couldn't you tolerate a Shu? What did she do wrong?" With Songshu suffering such a calamity, Wei Changyi had already passed judgment on me. In his heart, he believed my jealousy had flared up, that I couldn't tolerate his late wife's sister entering the manor as a concubine, and certainly couldn't tolerate her bearing an heir before me. Rumors outside even claimed that I had long harbored murderous intent toward Songshu, plotting for ages, just waiting for the kill tonight. The son I raised by my side with such devoted care every day was indifferent to the fact that I was dying, cursing me with hatred. "Father, Auntie, and I are the real family. You killed my mother, and now you want to kill Auntie and the baby in her belly too. You are so vicious, you don't deserve to be my mother." A metallic sweet taste surged up my throat. I didn't want to argue anymore. I just felt that my life was utterly laughable. I gave my whole heart, only to end up as nothing more than a vicious woman in his words. I lowered my eyes and watched the gleaming blade sink inch by inch into my flesh, letting the pain spread. Yet even so, it couldn't quell his overwhelming hatred, and I saw not a flicker of emotion on his face. I raised my hand to grasp the sharp blade and pushed it in a little deeper. Samano knocked on the door outside and reported, "General, the mother and child are safe." Hearing the news, Wei Changyi's hand holding the spear trembled uncontrollably. His face, still showing lingering anger, was full of shock. He must have regretted it, rushing over to hold my teetering body. Seeing his panic right now, I actually felt incredibly satisfied. But it was too late. I looked away, feeling that the face I once couldn't get enough of was now too dirty to even spare a glance at. I probably won't make it. But the sound lingering in my ears became clearer and clearer. Mother-in-law Sunday chattered on endlessly, listing my various crimes. "As a woman, you fail to please your husband and are disobedient to your parents. If you were in anyone else's house, you would have been cast out long ago. It is Changyi who pities you, which is why he has discussed this with you several times. If you truly are unwilling, then don't blame my Wei family. It felt like a lifetime ago." I was reborn back to the day this mother and son were forcing me to take Songshu into the manor as a concubine. I stood there, dazed, feeling a bit lost. Seeing that I remained silent, looking completely unmoved, my mother-in-law simply dropped the act. She slammed the table and scolded, "It is all because you can't give birth. Besides, which household's master doesn't have 3 wives and 4 concubines? You have no tolerance for others. How are you fit to be the mistress of my Wei family?" My hand hidden in my sleeve kept trembling. I secretly pinched myself to regain a shred of clarity. I said calmly, "Then take Songshu in." In the 3rd year of my marriage into the Wei family as a second wife, my mother-in-law insisted on taking a concubine for Wei Changyi on the grounds that I had no children to carry on the family line, even though Wei Changyi already had a 5-year-old son. The one to be taken in wasn't just anyone. It was his first wife's younger sister, Song Shu. Wei Changyi, and his first wife, Song Yu, were childhood sweethearts. They were engaged in their youth and went through thick and thin together. It was considered a beautiful story. It is a pity Song Yu had such a hard life. After giving birth to Wei Zheng, her health grew worse with each passing year. Wei Changyi was busy fighting battles all over the place and showed her little care. Her mother-in-law was difficult and didn't have much heart for others. While she wasn't excessively harsh, she never let Song Yu enjoy a single day of comfort. The young child was not yet 3 years old when she passed away. The Wei family ancestors were military generals, but by Wei Changyi's generation, decades later, their influence had waned. Although the Song family held only a minor 5th-rank post, they were considered reputable civil officials. Being willing to part with their beloved daughter to marry her into that family was truly an act of benevolence. Yet they never expected she would pass away so early. Half a year later, Wei Changyi was credited with suppressing a rebellion and instantly became the new rising star of the capital, with everyone trying to latch on to him. And because Wei Changyi had such handsome looks, the noble young ladies of the capital were fighting and scrambling to marry him, even if it meant becoming a second wife. The matchmakers couldn't bear to see him a widower. They practically wore down his threshold, yet Wei Changyi showed no interest in any of the young ladies. To the public, he simply said that with his first wife recently passed, he had no intention of remarrying. It was quite the show of deep affection that earned him a sterling reputation. Some infatuated girls even refused to eat or drink, desperate to marry Master Wei. Naturally, I was no exception. I owed Wei Changyi a debt of gratitude for saving my life. That year, roving bandits were running rampant. They kidnapped me to demand a ransom from my father. I found a chance to escape into the dense forest, but accidentally injured my leg, and that bandit chased after me. Deep in the woods, he started having other ideas about me, and the clothes on my body were torn to shreds. I happened to run into Wei Changyi, who was returning to the capital from the border to report on his duties. He came galloping on horseback and shot dead the bandit who had ill intentions towards me with a single arrow. While I was still in shock, I suddenly felt a wave of warmth. He wrapped his cloak around me, picked me up by the waist, and escorted me back to the manor under the cover of night. He also promised me that this matter would not be made public, as he was concerned about my reputation as a maiden. After that, Wei Changyi appeared in my dreams many times. Father saw through my thoughts and sent a matchmaker to propose a marriage, but was rejected multiple times. I was unhappy for many days because of this. I originally thought this marriage would never happen. Yet half a month later, Wei Changyi came to the door personally to ask for my hand, and I was overjoyed. Even if it meant being a second wife and a stepmother, I was willing. My father was quite satisfied with my match. Coming from a merchant family, being able to marry the highly decorated Wei Changyi was considered a stroke of good luck. Everyone said this was an excellent match. Yet, it was also this marriage that sent me to my doom. On our wedding night, I sat waiting alone in the bridal chamber until midnight, but he never came to lift my veil. He only sent a page boy to inform me that he was busy with military affairs and would be sleeping in the study. The next day, when serving tea to my mother-in-law, Wei Changyi refused to stand with me. He stood below the steps with his hands behind his back, speaking coldly, "You went to great lengths to enter my Wei family. Now that your wish is fulfilled, I expect you to be a virtuous wife, gentle and submissive, taking care of the household up and down. As for us, do not expect anything more." I truly didn't understand why he married me only to treat me so coldly. Wei Changyi kept a cold face the whole time, curling his lips to sneer. "If you are not willing, you can just have your dad take you back." On the very first day of our marriage, he trampled my dignity to pieces just like that. When I returned home 3 days later, it was only after I questioned him again and again that Dad finally agreed to reveal the truth. Wei Changyi was only willing to marry me because the dowry my dad gave was generous enough. Although Wei Changyi has military merits and plenty of imperial rewards, appearing to be in his prime, he has long been hollowed out inside after all these years. He still has to support such a large family in the general's manner. Not only is the family fortune long gone, but they even rely on pawning off possessions to make ends meet. When my father heard the news, he personally went to see my mother-in-law to make this marriage happen. My Yu family has been merchants for generations. By my father's generation, we were already famous wealthy merchants in the capital, and I was the only daughter. My father granted a dowry of 10 carriage, loads filled the holes in the estate's accounts, and sent me into the Wei family. There was just one condition. Wei Changyi must not take a concubine in this life, and the entire Wei family can only have me as its mistress. I suppose since Wei Changyi had just lost his wife, he had no interest in romance. Though my mother-in-law looked down on my background, she was tempted by my dowry. So she made the decision for Wei Changyi, agreed to the match, and even threatened him with her life, ordering him to come to my door and ask for my hand. He married me for money, nothing to do with love. Now the mother and son keep pestering me about bringing Songshu into the household. They've completely cast aside the promise they made to my dad never to take a concubine. Seeing that I finally relented, mother-in-law couldn't hide her secret delight. Yet she didn't forget to counsel me. Since you've come to terms with it, that is very good. The Song family has shown great kindness to our Wei family, and we cannot be ungrateful. Don't you agree? The string of deep green jade prayer beads in mother-in-law's hand made me zone out for a moment. I took a sip of tea, nodded slightly, and said, if letting Songshu enter the household can bring mother-in-law a moment of peace, then that is a good thing. Come to think of it, in the previous life, mother-in-law didn't think much of the Song family. The reason she is so urgent now is just because she mistreated Enfei Song and feels guilty. So she is thinking of using this concubine business to make amends, all so she can hold her head up in front of the Buddha. My mother-in-law immediately twitched the corners of her mouth, pretending to comfort me. It is best if you can come to terms with it. Which noble household doesn't have a few concubines? We know the Song family inside and out. Once Songshu enters the door, rest assured, I will definitely make her behave obediently, and not fight or compete for anything. I, however, didn't care much. It doesn't matter. If the general meets anyone he likes, he can take them all in. Wei Changyi seemed displeased and spoke up in defense. There are no others, just a Shu. I lowered my eyes, merely giving a mocking smile. He felt deeply offended, frowning as he asked me, what are you laughing at? In my previous life after I married him, Wei Changyi dragged his feet and refused to consummate the marriage with me. My mother-in-law rarely gave me a pleasant look. Even though I waited on her with good food and drink, she still made snide remarks, saying I couldn't keep my husband's heart and was truly lacking in virtue. Even the servants in the residence viewed me, the mistress of the house, as a mere decoration. Dad once comforted me, saying there was no point in competing with a dead person for affection. I figure since we're married, we have to keep on living our lives. Giving each other the cold shoulder like this isn't the way. I went to the study to catch him, but ran into him returning from a banquet. He was dead drunk, pinning me onto the desk in the study, tearing the clothes off my body like a madman. I struggled to no avail, wanting to half-heartedly yield and consummate the marriage with him, but I still felt that doing it in such a murky way would be letting myself down, so I swung a palm at him, bringing him half back to his senses. He gazed at the portrait of his late wife before him and said accusingly, "You shouldn't have come." He had given strict orders that the study was a restricted area and no one was allowed to set foot inside. It was then I realized that in the half-year since marrying me, he had been here every day mourning his late wife. I stood dazed in front of that portrait. The inscription read, "My wife, You." I suddenly remembered that you, he shouted just now when we were lost in passion actually meant this, and I just felt a wave of nausea rising in my chest. I returned to my bedroom like a lost soul, but heard the maids in the corridor gossiping that day was his late wife's death anniversary. From that day on, I became the laughingstock of the entire general's manor. Wei Changyi knew I was having a hard time in the manor. He could have resolved my predicament with just a word or two, but he refused to speak up for me. I know he holds a grudge against me. In the 3 years that followed, I was cautious and timid, working hard all day long. I served my mother, in-law, took care of the young child, kept his household worry-free, and did everything to support him and pave the way for his future, all as a way to make amends. Even though Wei Changyi was a little cold and indifferent, with all I did for him, even a stone would have been warmed up by now. But I never imagined that he viewed my father using my dowry as leverage to force him into marrying me as the greatest humiliation of his life, and his resentment had already run deep. He married me for money, yet somehow I was the one with dirty methods. I was scheming and malicious, unable to compare to his virtuous first wife, let alone his gentle and submissive concubine. Even until death, all I got from him was the phrase, "poisonous woman." And Wei Changyi, who always prided himself on his deep devotion, was secretly carrying on with his wife's sister, shacking up without a matchmaker. Only now do I realize that a man as fickle as Wei Changyi was never worthy of me marrying him. He is the one who isn't worthy. Ridiculous people are often despicable too. It is fine if he hasn't forgotten the one before, but he is using Songshu to humiliate me. Beneath the hypocrisy, it is all just greed. I smirked and said, "General, if Songyu knew down in the underworld how deeply you care for her sister and how you look after the Song family, I am afraid she'd crawl out of the ground just to kowtow to you." The sarcasm was delivered with biting precision. Me mother. In-law looked stunned, unable to say a word for a long while. Wei Changyi hated it most when people mentioned his fated first wife, and hated it even more when someone used Songyu's death to stab at his heart. He flew into a rage out of humiliation, slammed the table, and stood up. "Lady Yu, married for 3 years." He was only willing to address me as Lady Yu. I stood up and decided to simply state my stance directly. "From now on, taking concubines and keeping maids is all up to you. Just one thing, all expenses must come from your accounts." I kindly reminded, "If mother-in-law has no savings, then there is no need to think about taking a concubine anymore." Wei Changyi slammed the table and stood up, his eyes splitting with rage. "Do you think my Wei family has to rely on a woman like you to survive?" I looked at him, not deliberately emphasizing anything, just stating the facts lightly. "Believe it or not, everything is recorded in the household ledgers, clear at a glance. You, my mother-in-law, didn't dare look at Wei Changyi. She just pretended to be angered by me, stroking her own chest." I swept past their scrutinizing gazes, my eyes landing on Wei Chan, who sat upright on the side, remaining silent the whole time. He was a child after all, because he had cried and threatened me repeatedly over the past few days, just to get his aunt into the house. He was too guilty to look at me. I went on speaking my mind. "After concubine song enters the household, it doesn't really matter if Wei Qian wants to live with concubine song." Wei Qian pursed his lips. He was haughty and had never yielded to anyone. He stiffened his neck and said, "If mother knows she was wrong, I will still continue to stay by mother's side." The implication was, even if you are wrong, I still acknowledge you and won't hold it against you. He was as surly as ever, but I was tired of it. What came out was an uncontrollable cold shout. "I am not your mother." Sharp, piercing. My scolding left Wei Qian stunned. Once he came to his senses, he kicked me while I was off guard, then stood arrogantly with his hands on his hips and shouted, "From now on, I won't call you mother ever again." My mother-in-law, always protective of her own, carried her precious grandson out of the parlor. As she left, she muttered, Not his real mother after all. Can't expect you to treat him that well. My mother-in-law secretly believed that after Songshu entered the house, Wei Qian would be better off being cared for by his biological aunt than by me. That was exactly what she was counting on. Wei Changyi's face also darkened. Why bicker with a child? I swallowed hard, looked away, and said coldly, "He said it. I am not his mother." When I entered the Wei household, Wei Qian was barely 3, an age where he didn't know a thing about the world, yet he looked so brooding, unhappy all day long. I racked my brains gathering rare knacks to cheer him up, but never got a single good look in return. But he is just a child after all. After I put up with his cold shoulder a few times, he was willing to get close to me. Wei Qian's features bore quite a resemblance to Wei Changyi. Though he wasn't my biological son, I treated him no differently, always prioritizing him for any good food or fun things. When he was old enough to learn to read and write, I hired the best tutor for his early education. Yet, I never expected that the child I carefully raised for 3 years would be an ungrateful wretch. He watched coldly as I was stabbed to death by Wei Changyi, without a shred of pity, harboring nothing but resentment toward me. He has got even more schemes now. To force me to give in, I don't know if someone put him up to it, but he specifically hits me where it hurts, using whether he'll stay with me to threaten me. But after this ordeal, I figured it out. If others can play the wicked stepmother, naturally I can too. The day Songshu married into the family, it was indeed lively. Even though he was taking a concubine, Wei Changyi couldn't bear to slight her after all, using the ceremonial procession of a noble concubine. To keep up appearances, my mother-in-law had all the food and drink catered by the best restaurant in the city. This spectacle even surpassed the scene of when I married Wei Changyi. Back then, because I was a successor wife, it wasn't appropriate to make a grand affair of it. But they didn't even arrange a fitting scale or ceremony, just sending a small sedan chair over. I assumed he just didn't like showing off, but looking at it now, it is clear he simply couldn't be bothered to put any effort into me. At the banquet, some noble ladies were also sizing me up in private, speaking sarcastically. Not everyone can handle being a second wife. Looking all across Shangjing, even an original wife wouldn't bustle about like this to take a concubine for her husband. This Lady Yu is really the first of her kind. Summoning clicked their tongue in wonder. Isn't that the truth? That Song family really found themselves a pushover. I personally went to the Song family to welcome concubine Song into the household, giving them plenty of face. Every courtesy was performed thoroughly. Even my picky mother-in-law couldn't say half a word of no. Maid Miangxia, however, reddened her eyes, feeling aggrieved for me after hearing this. She wanted to go up and argue, but I stopped her. Why fight over this moment of pique and just ask for trouble? Besides, it is not like I haven't tried to stop it before. In my previous life, seeing that the Wei family was getting better, the Song family also entertained the thought of sending their second daughter over to be the successor wife, just waiting for Songshu to come of age, hoping the two families could reconcile. But unexpectedly, my father beat them to it. The Song family still didn't give up. On the second day after Songshu came of age, the Song family sent her to Wei Changyi's military camp at the border. It wasn't until half a year later that Wei Changyi returned to the capital to report on his duties, bringing the pregnant Songshu back with him. Songshu couldn't be brought through the front door, so she had to be kept as a mistress on the outside. She was supported like that for half a year, with doctors frequently going over for visits. As time went on, rumors began to spread throughout the capital. Public clamor can melt gold and destroy bones. The Song family held a minor fifth rank official post and prided themselves on being a scholarly household, so they felt utterly humiliated. They brought people to barge into my courtyard, forcing me, the mistress of the house, to give them an answer. An innocent girl had given her body to a man and was now carrying his seed. If the Wei family wouldn't take her in, there likely wouldn't be a way for Songshu to survive. Songshu was driven to hang herself. If Wei Changyi hadn't arrived in time, it would likely have been a case of 2 lives lost in one body. After Wei Changyi got her settled, he dragged his long spear into my bedroom and, without a word, slashed to death the pair of parrots I had always cherished. It was meant as a warning. Even so, I didn't give in. But the very next day, he brought her into the manor and settled her in the west courtyard. After Song Shu's failed suicide attempt, Wei Qian grew much more distant from me too. A child's face shows everything. He couldn't hide his look of annoyance and disgust even if he tried. I ended up with a reputation for being virtueless and jealous, and was locked in the ancestral hall by my mother. In-law punished to kneel every day and confess my sins to the Wei family ancestors. I never saw Song Shu once, right up until she went into labor. In the end, her difficult birth caused by the baby being too large became my fault alone, and served as the excuse for Wei Changyi to kill me. But Song Shu survived the gates of hell in the end, and rising in status thanks to her son. She was elevated to the position of legal wife. I, however, died on that night. I was virtuous and kind, devoting my whole heart. Yet in the end, I was merely sewing the wedding dress for someone else. Starting over this time, I only want to amend the mistakes of my past life and make them pay back everything they owe me. That is all. According to the rules, a concubine must pay respects to the mistress upon entering the household. It wasn't until the sun was high in the sky that Song Shu, dressed in red and sticking out her belly, leisurely stepped into the front hall while stroking her hair. She put on a coy look and said, "The general said I was worn out yesterday and didn't need to rise early. I never expected I'd make elder sister wait for me for so long." She supported her waist and held the tea with one hand, tilting her chin up. She didn't want to feign even a shred of submissiveness. "Sister, please have some tea." Aunt Chin couldn't stand it, and couldn't help but speak up to remind her. Concubine song. A concubine offering tea must perform the full kowtow. Even so, Song Shu still had no intention of kneeling down, defending herself. "My body is really heavy. Please excuse me, sister," the mother. In-law spoke up in defense. "It is just a formality. Let's dispense with it if we can." Aunt Chin curtsied and said, "The old madam is truly kind-hearted, but the ancestors' rules cannot be forgotten." Not to mention concubine song was late offering tea to the mistress on her first day in the manor. Her attire is also inappropriate. I don't know whose rules concubine song is following, that a concubine dares to wear true red in front of the official wife. If word gets out, people will only say our general's manor lacks discipline. As she spoke, she raised her hand and called to the maids waiting outside. "Come here, change concubine Song's clothes." Although Song Shu relied on my mother, in-law's support, Aunt Chin had caught hold of her blatant misconduct. So even if my mother-in-law wanted to defend her, she couldn't say a word. After a bit of a struggle, seeing she wasn't going to get any advantage, Song Shu had to feign obedience. "Please, sister, have my tea." I shot her a sideways glance and slowly reached out to take it, but she couldn't keep her cool and let go before I did, shattering the teacup all over the floor. Song Shu let out an ayah, looking regretful, but didn't forget to shift the blame onto me. "Sister, no matter how much you dislike me entering the household, you shouldn't take your anger out on the Empress Dowager's gift." My mother, in-law, didn't doubt her for a second, and the scolding came right out. "You blind fool, this is a reward from the Empress Dowager, such a supreme honor, and you just went and smashed it, you." I frowned. Usually, these gifted items are kept in the storeroom, and the key is held by my mother-in-law. Seeing the fake look of panic on her face, I understood everything. It was just a ploy to frame me. Wei Qian was good at reading the room, and mother-in-law gave a cold snort. "For Qianer's sake, I won't hold it against you." Then she started bossing people around again. "Shu is returning home in 3 days. I remember you have a set of white jade and glazed glass teacups sitting uselessly in the storeroom. Her father loves calligraphy, So wrap up that red silk inkstone too. Let Shu take them along. Don't let anyone think our Wei family is slighting. Shu. These were all rare treasures my dad scoured from all over for me. My most prized dowry meant to stay at the bottom of my chest, worth a fortune. Song Shu was naturally delighted. Thank you for your affection, mother-in-law. I leisurely took a sip of tea and smiled. Concubine Song. Don't be in a rush to give thanks, mother. In-law is generous, but she really shouldn't be using my dowry to show off and buy face for herself. In the past, so that Wei Changyi would have a smoother path in officialdom, mother-in-law had spoken to me both openly and hinted secretly about giving gifts and greasing palms. Though unwilling, I couldn't stop her from taking matters into her own hands. Thinking that parting with some wealth could spare me from her nagging and gossip, I didn't fuss about it, but that only fueled her current habit of taking things without asking. I suppose she was concerned about her reputation in front of Songshu, so she wanted to put on the airs of a mother-in-law. She opened her mouth and started lecturing again. Since you've married into the Wei family, you ought to put your husband's family first, respect your elders, care for the young ones, and keep the household stable. We are all one family, so why is it that every word out of your mouth is about the dowry? It just makes us a laughingstock to anyone listening. Songshu fanned the flames at just the right moment. This is where you are in the wrong, sister. You are already married now, and as the only daughter in the family, your dad will have to give it to you sooner or later anyway. Their abacus beads practically exploded right in my face. I remained silent. So she thought she was completely in the right. With the air of someone who has been through it all, she continued to earnestly advise. Now that Songshu has come to live with you, you sisters should work together to serve Changyi well. Don't let him be distracted by the trivial matters of the inner quarters and forget his duties as a wife. Songshu obediently accepted the lecture. Yes, mother, in-law is right. From now on, this concubine will spare no effort. I also hope sister will look out for me a little. How could I not see through mother-in-law's schemes? She just wants me to loosen my grip on the dowry, that is all. I simply spoke bluntly. Even if mother-in-law talks until the sky falls, the law is clear regarding a woman's dowry. It is solely mine to control. Taking without asking is theft. Is mother-in-law trying to seize it now? Mother-in-law hadn't expected to waste her breath like that, and she fumed. You! Songshu clutched her chest, putting on a frightened look. Sister really is throwing her weight around. How can you bring up the government laws just because of a few unpleasant words? Wei Qian curled his lip. Auntie is right. Mother is being a bit too stingy. Don't tell me you are going to live off that dowry from now on. He surely doesn't realize that it is because he is being raised in luxury now, with the very best food and clothing, and having never suffered hard times, that he can say such things so lightly. I looked at Wei Qian and told him directly, I don't need to say much. Just look at how your grandmother and aunt are fixated on it, and you'll know exactly how much my dowry is worth. Songshu and my mother-in-law felt the shame of having their hidden motives exposed. What nonsense are you spouting in front of the child again? Seeing how unyielding I was, Songshu softened her stance, provoking sister to anger for no reason, and causing this quarrel with mother-in-law is truly my fault. Is sister blaming me for not performing the proper formal bow just now? Fine, as long as it puts sister at ease, I can kneel. Saying that, she made to kneel. I didn't care in the slightest, merely stating a fact. Concubine Song, don't flatter yourself. That kneel of yours isn't worth that tea set, nor is it worth that Duan inkstone. Songshu went ahead and knelt anyway, but was stopped by a hand. Only then did I realize that her sudden change of tone was merely because she had glimpsed Wei Changyi standing by the door. Upon seeing Wei Changyi, Wei Qian couldn't wait to tattle on me to him. Father, it is all this woman's fault. She defied grandmother and disrespected her elders. Punishing her to kneel in the ancestral hall wouldn't be too harsh. Wei Changyi kept a cold face and passed judgment on me directly. Lock Mrs. Yu in the ancestral hall and cut off food and water. Without my permission, no one is permitted to let her out. Aunt Chin couldn't stand it and spoke up to stop him. General, no matter how wrong the madam is, she is still the mistress of the household. Where will her dignity be if you do this? Wei Changyi, however, said, Lady Yu disrespects her elders and speaks out of turn. It is already an act of leniency that I haven't dragged her to the authorities, so say no more. He has always been cruel to me. It wasn't until the evening of the third day that Wei Changyi finally agreed to let me out of the ancestral hall. The moment I stepped out of the ancestral hall, I saw Wei Qian from a distance standing under that parasol tree, crying himself hoarse and covered in blood. He looked at me, called out, "Mother," just once, and then collapsed. Aunt Chin panicked for a moment too, and stepped forward to check. I followed over. Wei Qian's face was deathly pale, and his body twitched from time to time. I crouched down and patted his face. "Wei Qian, are you okay? Wake up, wake up." Auntie Chin hurriedly shouted into the courtyard. "Quick! Call a doctor! Call a doctor!" Instantly, there was a flurry of panic. Just in that moment when I was distracted, Wei Qian suddenly opened his eyes, stood up, and shoved me hard toward the lotus pond behind me. Even Auntie Chin was shocked and caught off guard. I fell into the pond, and the surrounding water surged toward me from all sides. The fear of drowning from my childhood swept over me again, instantly submerging me. I was flailing wildly in the water when I saw Songshu, sticking out her belly and holding Wei Qian as they stood there, smiling ever so smugly. "Channer, well, didn't Auntie tell you? Even if your mother talks tough, she still cares about you." Wei Qian still held a grudge against me. "If you make me lose face again in the future, it won't be as simple as just swallowing a few mouthfuls of water." I climbed onto the bank in a daze and saw Songshu standing in front of Wei Changyi, making excuses for Wei Qian. Chandra didn't mean it. It was just a child's prank. "General, please don't blame him." Amy Angxia couldn't hold back her temper, pointing at Wei Qian's nose and cursing. "You are simply an ungrateful wretch. Madam has raised you for so many years, yet at such a young age you dare to be so vicious. I will definitely report you to the authorities." Songshu slapped Mianxia hard across the face, cursing, "How dare a maid like you be so disrespectful to your master?" Smack. I returned the favor with a backhanded slap. Caught off guard, she stumbled back 2 steps and was supported from behind by Wei Changyi. Songshu covered half her face, acting completely innocent regarding the matter of inciting Wei Qian to push me into the water. It was clearly sister who didn't stand steady. How did it become murder? Besides, she is standing right here safe and sound. If this gets out, isn't it the reputation of the general's manor that will be ruined? She was full of smooth talk and deceit. I wanted to raise my hand again, but my wrist was already gripped by Wei Changyi, suspended in midair. Wei Qian's face turned deadly pale from fright. Knowing he had caused trouble, he hid behind Wei Changyi, not daring to look at me, yet he didn't forget to defend himself. Yeah, it was clearly her who didn't stand steady. After a long while, Wei Changyi finally spoke. "Madam lost her footing and fell into the water. What happened today must not be spread abroad." To back Songshu up, he twisted the truth and made this final verdict. I nearly lost my life. It only earned a fraction of emotion from Wei Changyi. "Take my calling card and invite the imperial physician from the palace to come examine Madam." "No need." I pulled the cloak behind me tighter, enduring the chill on my body, and looked at him without much emotion, saying, "Wei Changyi, why don't we get a divorce?" It didn't matter if it was amicable or not. The separation was definitely happening. I first had Mianchu take people to inventory the dowry I brought over, then sorted through the residence's accounts, mostly clearing them all up. Although I had long intended to draw a clear line with the Wei family. But I also knew that the Wei family wouldn't let me get away so easily. Moreover, this marriage between Wei Changyi and me had once reached the emperor's ears. The emperor once said General Wei disregarded class distinctions to form a union between two families, worthy of being a model for all officials. On the wedding day, palace attendants followed the imperial order to deliver a pair of dragon and phoenix wedding candles, and a pair of jade ruies. At that time, Wei Changyi was a rising noble in the court, while I was just a merchant's daughter. Even with vast wealth, I was still looked down upon. No matter how you put it, it was me climbing up the social ladder into the Wei family. If this marriage ends up getting too ugly, it would be a slap in the face to the royal family. This is also the reason why, despite being married for 3 years without issue, my mother-in-law refuses to easily cast me aside. Wei Changyi's refusal was also within my expectations. He doesn't want to stain his reputation or ruin his official career because of me. Moreover, even though I am a figurehead as the mistress of the house, I've still been of much help to him. So the matter of a mutual divorce will have to be planned at length. I calculated the days carefully. Songshu is about to go into labor. So I found a broker and bought a 3-courtyard residence in the south of the city, picked out the essential items and moved them over first. My mother-in-law couldn't pay me any mind. She was finding the best midwife in the city for Songshu and arranging everything for the delivery. She didn't even know that Wei Qian hadn't gone to school for 3 days. Zhu Sheng tracked me down here. He said Wei Qian was out fighting crickets, along with the uncle from the Song family. Zhu Sheng is the study companion I arranged for Wei Qian. He comes from a hard background. He is only 7 or 8 years old, yet possesses a maturity beyond his peers. Seeing him at this moment, I actually felt a bit dazed. The night I was stabbed to death by Wei Changyi with a spear, he was the one knocking on the door to deliver a message, but unexpectedly, he was still a step too late. I looked at his still tender face, smiled, and asked him, "Wei Qian is unwilling to study, but are you?" He has been bullied plenty by Wei Qian, ordered around, beaten or scolded. I know he has been enduring it all just so he could eavesdrop under the window, while Wei Qian listens to the teacher's lectures. After a long while, Zhu Sheng finally came back to his senses and nodded in agreement. Then he asked how he should repay me. His eyes were filled with utter sincerity, moving me. The flaky pastries from that shop in the south of the city are hard to buy. Just run some errands for me more often on ordinary days. 3 days later, when Zhu Sheng delivered the pastries to me, the corner of his eye was black and blue, and even his body was bruised purple. I had to question him repeatedly before he was willing to speak. It was Wei Qian. He couldn't stand seeing Zhu Sheng sitting together with him listening to the teacher's lecture, so after school, he ordered the servant by his side to give him a beating. I asked again, "Did you fight back?" He shook his head. I did not. I frowned, which made him even more nervous, and he rushed to explain to me, "Madam, rest assured, I didn't fight back. The little young master is unharmed." He was worried I would take my anger out on him. I continued applying medicine to him and instructed him, "Next time if you get bullied, remember to hit back. You haven't done anything wrong. You shouldn't have to bear this." As I was packing up the medicine kit, I caught a glimpse of Wei Qian out of the corner of my eye. He was standing at the doorway, looking like he wanted to say something but stopped. I didn't pay him any attention, but he blocked my path. He anxiously confirmed with me, "Do you really not want me anymore?" I nodded and said, "Yeah, I don't." Wei Qian still wouldn't give up. "You want Zhu Sheng to be your son. That is not impossible either, if Zhu Sheng is willing." Wei Qian was still childish by nature. The hostility on him hadn't faded, carrying a chest full of resentment. "If you don't want me, then don't. I don't care about you anyway. You remember this. It was me who didn't want you. But what does this matter? It was Wei Changyi who made me sense something was off. Lately, he came to my courtyard frequently. It must be about me falling into the water. He wants to make amends. It is just that whenever I mention a divorce, he always looks like he wants to say something but holds back. He wants to drag things out, so I'll give up on the idea myself. No one was more panicked than Songshu. Every time Wei Changyi came to my courtyard, she'd send a maid to call him away, claiming she was about to give birth and felt unwell. Even so, Songshu couldn't sit still any longer. A few days ago, I didn't accept the concubine's tea and backhanded the glazed cup bestowed by the Empress Dowager. I don't know how word got out. On top of that, disrespecting my mother, in-law, disobeying my elders, bullying the concubine, mistreating the young child. Every single thing was pinned on my head, jealous and heartless, venomous as a snake or scorpion. My reputation, which I never really bothered to manage, is now even more rotten out there. My mother, in-law, lectures me constantly, both to my face and behind my back, even when it comes to trivial matters in the manor, like sweeping and cleaning. She always manages to find fault. The two of them can't wait to catch me in a mistake. It is nothing more than an attempt to erode my authority as the mistress step by step. They want to see my reputation ruined, and even make it impossible for me to survive in the capital. I saw they'd pretty much laid the groundwork, so I just went along with their wishes. In that case, mother, in-law must deem me unfit to hold the authority of managing the household. I return the tallies and keys today, and ask that mother-in-law resumes charge of the domestic affairs. Better I hand it over voluntarily than have people constantly eyeing it day and night. It came too easily. Although my mother-in-law had her doubts, she couldn't resist Songshu's repeated secret urging, and she even took this opportunity to send Wei Qian straight into Songshu's room. Songshu was feeling smug, thinking that just because I'd lost the rights to manage the household, she had the whole general's manor in her grasp. But how would they know now? The man, the reputation, the adopted son, and even that damn authority of the mistress of the house. None of it matters to me in the slightest. Ever since Songshu took charge of the household, I've thrown myself entirely into the business at the shops. In my past life, my mother-in-law had plenty of complaints about me showing my face in public to do business. Yet whenever she opened her mouth to ask me for silver to cover expenses, she suddenly wouldn't say a word about it. I figured that anything that could be solved with money wasn't worth wasting mental energy on. I had hoped that my mother-in-law would take the money and keep her mouth shut. But the moment she turned around, she'd find opportunities to gossip about me among the noble ladies, insinuating that I was a vulgar merchant who wasn't fit for high society. She was so two-faced, yet I endured it again and again. But blind tolerance and obedience only made people think I was a pushover, a woman of the inner residence who lived by her husband's word, and was destined never to stir up any waves. But my ambitions did not lie within this high-walled inner residence. Since I started my schooling at age 3, Dad invited famous teachers from all over to teach me to read and understand reason. He often kept me by his side to teach me the ways of business, too. Dad even said that if it weren't for my merchant background, I would surely have been able to make a name for myself and have a boundless future. Before I got married, I mentioned to Father that I wanted to open a business school specifically for women. I know that making their way in the world has always been full of twists and hardships. Teaching them skills to survive is better than living under someone else's roof and suffering their torment. But after getting married, I was trapped all day by the endless rules of these high-walled mansions, constantly worrying about the general's manor's reputation. For the title of the general's lady, for the burden of being the mistress of the house, I barely scraped by in this world. My will slowly ground away. Picking it up again now isn't an easy task. Father built a porridge station and a charity clinic in the south of the city to provide a foothold for refugees fleeing disaster. I handled everything personally. I poured half of the earnings from my shops into this, without caring about the gains or losses. For half a month straight, I rarely showed my face in the manor. Songshu couldn't wait to show off her airs as the lady in charge. She used the general's manor's name in private to befriend many officials' wives and noblewomen, acting very much like she intended to replace me. Relying on my mother-in-law's protection and Wei Changyi's indulgence, she became even more unscrupulous in her actions within the manor. The servants in the manor are used to reading the room. They all thought I wouldn't hold the position of mistress for much longer. So they obeyed Songshu's every command. Some of the bolder ones, just to curry favor with Songshu, deliberately gave me the cold shoulder and skimped on the supplies for my courtyard. Such a brazen provocation made Mingxia so angry she couldn't sit still. Pa! Who knows whose power these bastards are relying on? Miss is the mistress of the house after all. Why must you let them trample on you like this? Why not report it to the master and let him stand up for you? In my previous life, when my father learned of my death, he went to the authorities several times to cry injustice for me. He tried to sue the general's manor, but they didn't dare to rashly accept the case. Instead, he was framed by Songshu for colluding with rebels and miserably exiled. This time, I definitely can't drag my dad into this again. My heart tightened, and I urged her. My dad absolutely must not know about this. Miangxia couldn't stand seeing me wronged, pouting, her eyes reddening with anxiety. Miss, you are just too kind, too soft-hearted, letting people bully you just like that. I thought Miss had married into a good family who knew they were a whole family of heartless wretches. Even Aunt Chin, who was usually so proper and well-behaved, cursed. Back then, the master let the young Miss marry over here simply because he thought the Wei family was a respectable household. But who would have thought this big mansion is actually full of filth? I just listened and let it pass, telling them to settle down. I handed the letter I'd written to Mingxia, instructing her to deliver it carefully to the Duke's manor, adding that she needed to take along that pot of green peonies from the courtyard that had just bloomed last night. Mingxia looked a bit hesitant, but we haven't had any dealings with the Duke of Ning's estate before. If we show up rashly, I am afraid we'll be turned away at the door. She was worried about my reputation that was down in the gutter. Nowadays, the noble ladies in the capital were avoiding me like the plague. I shook my head and said, "It doesn't matter, just go." At the end of the month, Songshu barged into my courtyard holding the account book Mr. Sunday had sent over. It was just over a single entry in there. I couldn't be bothered to waste my breath on her, so I pointed her in the right direction. Every entry in this ledger is recorded clearly. All expenses from before and after the concubine was taken in were handled by my mother. In-law, if anything is unclear, concubine song, you can go right ahead and ask my mother, in-law. Songshu was left with no defense. Seeing she couldn't get any leverage with me, she switched tactics and went to complain about me to Wei Changyi. Her words were filled with how she had poured her heart and soul into the general's manor, working herself to the bone for everyone's sake. As the mistress of the house, I spend all day showing my face in public for the sake of my shops while completely neglecting the household. Comparing the two, I seem especially less than human. To make it up to her, Wei Changyi allowed her to go to the Duke's ladies' peony banquet. She was desperate to make a name for herself, but I heard that Songshu wasn't even able to get in the door. Everyone in the capital knows that Lady Jiang of the Duke Ding Manor has a straightforward temper. When she tells someone off, she is completely unsparing. It is truly absolute anarchy these days. A mere concubine actually dares to attend the formal banquet. Does General Wei's household have any sense of hierarchy or propriety left at all? With just a few words, they sent Songshu packing back home. Since she couldn't afford to offend the Duke's household, she had to force herself to swallow this insult. The moment she returned to the residence, she was cornered by Mr. Sunday from the accounting office, who urged her repeatedly to hurry up and fill the deficit in the household accounts. Songshu privately assumed I was using this to drive a wedge between her and her mother-in-law, so she refused to actually ask her for the money. She had to just knock out her teeth and swallow them with blood, forced to settle the account herself. In my previous life, I was just like her, but now, Songshu had no money, so she had to find another way to get those tens of thousands of taels of silver. So, when Mingxia placed that IOU from the money house in front of me, I wasn't surprised. Black and white, on white paper exceptionally clear. She had mortgaged the Wei family's ancestral home without permission. On the day of the ceremony at Shangqing Temple, Madame Jiang finally agreed to see me. While praying to the Bodhisattva, I prayed for my freedom. Only she could help me with this. Madame Jiang is the Empress's bosom friend. Although I can't get the divorce papers from Wei Changyi, I can beg the Empress to issue a decree granting me a divorce, but it drew a sigh from Madame Jiang. Though your background isn't prominent, I've actually heard that you shelter the destitute, distribute porridge for relief, and do many good deeds. In truth, in my past life, I once had a brief encounter with Madame Jiang of the Duke's Manor. She is a warm-hearted sort, and the only one who was willing to speak up for me when the noble ladies from the various houses were mocking me. If I remember correctly, it was around May. The peonies the Duke's wife had been pampering in the backyard wilted overnight. One of the concubines did it on purpose, and even the best gardeners in the city couldn't save them. That pot of green peonies of mine solved her desperate crisis. She agreed to help me. It took less than 5 days in total for the divorce decree to be issued. Since the bond is broken and affection gone, a forced union would only breed resentment. I specially grant the request to dissolve your marriage contract. Madame Yu is permitted to return to her clan, and the dowry property shall be divided according to the law. Henceforth, male and female may marry freely, of no concern to one another. I accepted the decree and gave thanks. Before the palace attendant who proclaimed the decree had even gone far, my mother-in-law opened her mouth and cursed. My Wei family didn't cast you out. It is bad enough you aren't grateful, but now you actually want a consensual divorce. We really should have made you leave obediently as a cast-off wife. I'd really like to see which other household would be willing to take you in. As for Wei Changyi, he didn't believe it. You actually went to the Empress to beg. Wei Changyi, don't let me down again in the future. I lowered my eyes, recalling the scene when I first met him, leaving him with a final shred of dignity. The money Song Shu borrowed from the money house had never been paid back. The shopkeeper of the money house came to collect the debt but was chased out, left with no choice. He sued Song Shu at the government office. It wouldn't have come to mortgaging the house originally. It was Song Shu's greed acting up. Faced with the huge deficit in the household accounts, Song Shu successively invested in several rouge shops, grain stores, and even loan sharking. How could an outsider like her understand the tricks of the trade? Even if she cast a wide net, there was only one outcome. The money in her hand all went down the drain, losing every last cent. I heard from the gossipy servants that she went to Wei Changyi time and again, saying that little bit of salary wasn't enough, making Wei Changyi's face turn green. Previously, I didn't want these domestic trifles to annoy Wei Changyi, so I managed the household for him. It couldn't be said that I didn't do my best. But now, the moment he sits down, it is Song Shu calculating this and that. In his ear, his patience is just about gone. Song Shu is dead, set on redeeming the mortgaged house. She could only scrimp on every expense in the house, first by docking the servants' monthly wages, and then by selling off the household servants in droves. Her methods were sharp and ruthless, completely offending all the old hands in the residence. But the walls of the inner court aren't airtight. Once word got out, it became a scandal that the general's manor mistreats its servants. It wasn't until the authorities came to raid the mansion over Song Shu's loan sharking. Only then did Wei Changyi find out about the things Song Shu had done behind his back. Song Shu saw her little scheme fall apart and felt terribly wronged, weeping pitifully. There really wasn't enough ready cash in the residence, and the silver invested all went down the drain. I lent out some money at high interest, so that when things turn around later, I would surely be able to redeem this house. Upon hearing this, her mother-in-law couldn't catch her breath and fainted right on the spot. Wei Changyi was impeached by the censorate for favoring a concubine over his wife and having a disorderly household, and was further reprimanded by the emperor for failing to distinguish between legitimate and common-born, and for not managing his family strictly. It turned into a laughingstock for the people in the city. The porridge stall has been getting busy these days. Zhu Sheng stays by my side all day, and actually helps me a lot. It is just that Wei Qian didn't come at a good time. He just followed behind me, fighting with Zhu Sheng to do the chores. But he has never done things like this before. In a moment of carelessness, he got his hand scalded by the boiling porridge. Yet he stubbornly refused to apply medicine, only crying and asking me if he could go back to the manor. I suppose Songshu is too busy with the child in her belly to look after him. And feeling neglected, he finally remembered how I used to care for him without rest or sleep. I had Miangxia send word to Wei Changyi. It wasn't until evening that Wei Changyi finally came looking, carrying a drunken air. I handed the drowsy Wei Qian over to him, but I noticed his hands were trembling and weak. I turned around to focus on cleaning up the mess in the porridge shed, but heard him give a mocking laugh behind me. I really shouldn't have married you. It is I who am not worthy of you. I bit my lip tightly, my hand gripping the iron ladle turning even whiter. He continued, "In our 3 years of marriage, it is not that I haven't respected or loved you, but every time I get close to, I didn't intend to take your life. I promised Song Yu that after she passed, I would look after the Song family. That is why I entrusted the household to you. I was too indulgent. You truly shouldn't have married me. You want a divorce, and you are right to." "Shangwan," he sighed lightly. "I am the one who failed you." It was also around this time that news spread of the absurd incident, where Song Qi used the general's manor's name to rack up a massive gambling debt. Song Qi was indeed Songshu's full younger brother. He was the child the Song couple had in their old age, spoiled rotten by the old couple since childhood. At 17 or 18, he had no mind for studying to earn an official rank, instead spending every day lingering in brothels and entertainment quarters, addicted to gambling and lust. Now he was leading Wei Qian astray as well. Every time he caused a scene at the manor, it was just to ask Songshu for money. The Song family house had been gambled away by Song Chiold. Mr. Song had retired, and the old couple couldn't take the tossing about anymore, so they simply moved right into the Wei Manor. All their food, clothing, and expenses were of the highest quality, and every so often they would withdraw silver in Songshu's name. In no time at all, the money Songshu had was completely squandered. Naturally, she didn't dare tell Wei Changyi about these things. She could only look out for herself, proposing to bear a son for the Wei family, and asking Wei Changyi to promote her to equal wife. A mother's status rises with her son. It was only right. If Song Qi hadn't committed such a despicable act as seducing another man's wife, and then taking her virginity while drunk, perhaps he could have gotten what he wanted. But as it happened, that woman lost her innocence, and unable to bear the humiliation, hanged herself from a beam. Afterward, the woman's in-laws beat the Dengguan drum and sued all the way to the emperor's presence. With a case involving human life, even Wei Changyi couldn't protect him. The Song couple, having indulged their son in committing violence, were also implicated and punished. Songshu could only go and make a scene with Wei Changyi. She smashed the study to smithereens, cursed Wei Changyi for being incompetent, and even tore the portrait of his late wife, which he kept hanging in the study all day, into shreds. If my elder sister were still alive, things definitely wouldn't be like this today. You actually just watched helplessly as Brother Qi was executed. What face do you have to meet my elder sister? As they struggled with each other, she was slapped to the ground by Wei Changyi. Since then, Songshu acted even more crazily, and almost accidentally took Wei Qian's life. Wei Changyi locked her in the attic and arranged for people to deliver food and water daily. Songshu once sneaked out and came to beg before me. She wanted me to save her Song family, kneeling before me and kowtowing until her head was broken and bleeding. I know it was you who brought Songshi back from his exile journey. I beg you to spare his life. I'll do anything you want, I beg you. Miangxia sent someone to drive her out. Truly mad, speaking such nonsense. She wasn't stupid. Song Chi had once offended powerful nobles in the capital due to his loose tongue. Not only was he stripped of his exam qualifications, but he was also exiled. If I hadn't pulled strings and spent money, I am afraid he would have died on the journey to exile long ago. If Song Chi had been an honest and well-behaved person, then there wouldn't be this outcome today. When Song Shu learned that there was no hope for Song Chi's survival, she jumped from the attic on the day of his execution. My mother-in-law witnessed the horrific scene at the time and fell ill, never to recover. The next day, however, Wei Changyi handed a written indictment to the government office, charging my mother-in-law, Sunday, with using his name to embezzle military funds and seize commoners' fertile land, and every single charge was verified. The general's manor was raided, and Sunday was sentenced to exile. When Miangxia told me the news, she was still a bit puzzled. "Miss, weren't you afraid that if you gave that evidence to General Wei, he would cover for her? He is a military commander. Military supplies and pay are the foundation of the nation. He knows full well in his heart which weighs heavier." At this time, the war at the border had not stopped. Considering his past contributions to the realm, His Majesty allowed him to atone for his crimes through meritorious service. Before Wei Changyi went on campaign, he sent Wei Qian and that swaddled infant to an uncle's home in the countryside to be fostered. As for the Song family, those to be banished were banished, and those to be exiled were exiled. They were all cleared out completely. On the day the business academy was completed, received a letter sent from the border, crumpled and stained with blood. Miangxia asked me, "Miss, do you want to read this letter?" I rubbed my slightly dry eyes and said, "Burn it." Jusheng knocked down some locust flowers with a pole in the courtyard, smiling brightly. "Mom, I'll make locust flower cakes for you. The spring sun is radiant. From now on, it is all good scenery."